Good evening and welcome to Atlanta. We are here to cover UFC 236, Holloway versus Poirier 2. My name is John Morgan, joined by MMA Junkie and USA Today Sports Mike Bohn, the MacLife's Oscar Willis. Pleasure to have both of you guys here. We were all just kind of sitting around this beautiful studio space that we have here, also known as our Airbnb, and we were talking about some MMA anyway. We're here to cover the event. We said, you know what, why not just jump on the internet real quick and preview this fight card. So listen, the main event, the co-main event, I think two of the best fights on paper that you could put together. Really exciting. I'm torn though to see like how truly excited I am for the event. I'm excited for those two fights. I'm excited for the card. I'm torn if it's one of those like big superstar moments. It's not your boss Conor McGregor fighting, you know, it's not John Jones fighting, but at the same time, these two fights on paper are as good as it gets, and there's real stakes. So give me your take, Mike. I mean, how are you feeling about this fight card as a whole? Are you getting that, you know, big Las Vegas type fight feel?
Not really, but that doesn't mean it's not a big card. I mean, these are two extremely legitimate title fights. Like, I know the interim tag kind of takes something away from it, but like if you were just becoming a UFC fan or something, and I told you these are the two title fights, like you could easily sell it. These guys are both, all four of them, extremely deserving to be here. No issues on that front. Like if you're going to do interim titles, these guys deserve to be there. So yeah, I think these title fights are pretty much as good as it gets. Two of them on one card makes it a big card automatically. The rest below the two title fights, I mean, maybe leaves a little something to desire, but still, I think these two make it a worthwhile, you know, put your money down type of fight card.
I think it's a can't miss card if you're a fight fan. I think you and I were talking earlier, Oscar. You called it a hardcore fight fans card. I mean, this is a fight card for the fight fan. You have been gallivanting the globe. I mean, you're covering bare knuckle. You're doing a little bit of everything these days. So give me your take on this. Is it, because I think you're right, fight fans don't want to miss this card. I don't know if there's a sell to the casual fan where you say, this is why you have to tune in.
Yeah, I'm like a virus. I get everywhere. But yeah, for this fight card, I mean, it's not your UFC 235 with John Jones stacked from top to bottom. It's not going to be the next card in Vegas that's stacked top to bottom. But I think the strength of the top two, and sure enough, like we're not going to be cracking, you know, millions and millions of pay-per-view buys here, but I don't think anyone can look at these top two fights and think, well, that's not going to be a barn burner. And then, like Mike, you were saying, usually the interim title, it sort of comes with a bit of a stigma, like, oh, it's not really. But in this situation, sort of bizarrely, both interims do make sense, I think. I think it's one of the rare times where you can say, well, this isn't a promotional thing, this is a let's just keep things rolling thing. And I think because of that, it actually adds something to the two fights. I want to see them both 5 rounds anyway. Yep. I'm all for it.
I agree. It's kind of funny. Like you said, interim titles usually the kiss of death. You're like, dude, why are we creating this interim title? I mean, I think we've all complained, but they do make sense here. Let's start out with the main event, Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier. Man, just absolutely torn on who to root for in this fight, who to say is going to win. I know, Mike, I think you flipped a coin ultimately just to turn in your pick for staff picks, but you got Max Holloway, the dominant champion at 145. I mean, the win streak that he's on, historic. I mean, it's incredible, right? Moving up to 155 pounds, which I think a lot of people think is just probably the place he needs to be at some point in his career, if not like right now. Meanwhile, Dustin Poirier, I mean, here's this guy that's been grinding all the way through. You know, he's not this flash in the pan, this overnight sensation. You know, he's made it starting in the WEC days before the UFC even had a featherweight division. He's finally getting here. And yes, it is an interim title, but I think he said, I don't give a damn about that. It's a UFC title fight. So, man, give me your thoughts on this main event. Are you leaning one way or the other? And what have you thought, you know, seeing these guys this week and talking to them and spending time around them, man? Have you gotten any kind of tells from either of these guys?
Not really. As we get closer, I just find it more difficult to, like, I literally did flip a coin to make my staff prediction, which obviously we have to do, and it came up Max Holloway, as you guys will see, you know, Friday when we published it. But still, like, I could see this fight going either way. There's just so many different elements to it. It's the perfect time for these guys to run it back. Like, I think you laid it out perfectly there. Dustin Poirier has been through the absolute ringer. I mean, the only person who's had more UFC fights before getting their first title chance was Michael Bisping. Wow. And that says a lot right there. Like, I don't think Dustin has had quite as hard of a road as Bisping, because, like, I think we always saw
the recent road has been amazing. Yeah, the recent road has been incredible.
Like, since he moved to go with it,
yeah, like he moved up to lightweight, and his only blemish is that basically knockout to Michael Johnson, which just happened early in a fight, a guy with big power. But everything else besides that has been sensational from him. He really deserves this opportunity. Obviously, Tony Ferguson probably should have been here over him, just considering what he's done. But obviously, we kind of know what's going on with Tony. He shouldn't be here with what's going on. But if all things were equal, yeah, he would get this fight, and that's why they said they were going to do it first. But yeah, such a great matchup on paper. These guys are just unreal, and I really don't know how it's going to go, and that's what makes it so damn good.
Yeah, it's fun. We've been talking. We do like a Who You Got series, you know, each week, and you're talking to fighters and asking them to break it down, and everybody kind of gives you the same thing. They're like, well, it's an amazing fight. I love both these guys, but I'm a Dustin guy or I'm a Max guy. And it just goes to show you like the skills between these two. They're both so well rounded, and they both can definitely, you know, have paths to victory. So it's been, you know, nobody really says, oh, well, one guy clearly has the advantage. It's more just like, well, I like this guy. You know, I'm a fan. I want to ask you, Oscar. I mean, when we're here, you know, we spend time around these fighters. Of course, we had the open workouts last night. I wonder with Max Holloway. I think I'm just forever like tainted at watching him perform in the workouts. Am I crazy that I didn't see, like, if you really just put the workout footage, which again, they can go as hard as they want to. They don't have to go hard at all. They're not required to. But if you, like, Poirier was putting in work, right?
Yeah.
You looked at, meanwhile, Holloway, I couldn't tell if he was just kind of, that's it. Was he just chilling, running through the motions, or just we forever jinxed and cursed to feel like, I'm scared, I don't know about his health?
Well, listen, I mean, I'm not to put the tinfoil hat on, but I thought he was a bit sort of subdued today at media day. I mean, hey, it should be an easier cut. Like I say, they don't have to work out hard, but when you see Poirier, who looks fresh, who looks ready, and then Max sort of just going through the motions, I think, like you said, maybe we're just a little bit PTSD'd out from when he fell through the Khabib fight. But I mean, for the fight itself, it's interesting because I think about that outside the cage, but inside the cage, I'm almost scarred from the Ortega fight. I mean, the guy who showed up that night,
how do you pick
amazing.
6,000 punches a minute. You just think, well, if that's what he was like with a cardio at 45 after a terribly hard cut.
So true.
I mean, what's his output going to be like this Saturday? So it's interesting you say that because, yeah, I sort of look at him going, well, out of the two of you, I'd pick maybe you having the harder cut. But, I mean, that's all meant nothing in the past.
That's so crazy. And then the other thing, too, I mean, of course you go, oh, well, Holloway's the guy moving up from featherweight. You know, they stand next to each other. Holloway's the bigger guy. He's the bigger dude. I mean, maybe not as, you know, muscular or as thick or whatever. I mean, obviously, Poirier being the shorter guy can hold weight a little stockier. But it's not as if you're seeing some situation where Holloway's going to move up and you're going to say, oh, my God, you just stepped into the wrong division, man. These guys are way too big for you.
Yeah, they both, I think, belong at 155. I mean, Dustin was even saying today that this cut is getting harder and harder, and he's thinking about 170 at some point in the future, like especially with him seeing what Anthony Pettis was able to do, and you know he has a teammate in Jorge Masvidal who was a lightweight at one point. Like I think he has that confidence that eventually that might be his division. Obviously, if he wins the belt, like he still has a lot of work to do at lightweight, but I think, you know, he's 30 years old. We could see him at 170 at some point in the UFC. And he said the cut was hard, but he seemed to be in very good spirits today. I mean, I was down at ATT a couple weeks ago talking with him, and that's kind of the point in camp that I like talking to fighters the most, just a few weeks out. And he just seemed firing all cylinders. Watching him put in some of his work, you know, sparring. I won't mention who he was going against or anything, but he looked really, really good.
All right, so we know. Well, I was gonna say we know you flipped a coin to make a pick. All right, but if you could take that back. You get a clean slate. Don't worry about what the staff picks say tomorrow. Sure. You get a clean slate based on what you've seen here this week. Which way do you go?
Man, I think I still got to go Holloway just because he is on such a roll right now. Just his mentality, I thought was really interesting. Him talking to both him and Dustin. Dustin basically says, like, I'm preparing myself every fight that I need to leave something of myself in there. This is going to be fight of the night, potentially fight of the year. First round knockout would be dope, but like I need to prepare myself to go through all of that. And Max is like, nah, bro, like I'm going in there to dominate. Like his key word of the week is dominance, dominance, dominance. He basically said, you know, everyone was saying Ortega fight was going to be fight of the year. And when I walked past press row on that night in Toronto, I had to pick up all your guys' jaws off the floor on press row because like I saw that was something that blew you all away, and that's what I'm looking to do every single time. So there's definitely a little difference in mentality between the two, and I think Max is just on such a roll. He's doing so well right now. He's finding his groove. It's really, really hard to pick against him, but seeing Dustin Poirier get that belt would be a really amazing accomplishment for him. He's been through so much. He's, you know, both these guys, such great guys, great fathers, you know, great family men, all that kind of stuff. But if Max Holloway loses, not the end of the world. He has a title to go back, defend at 145. Dustin Poirier loses, man, who knows how long it's going to take him. Maybe he goes back to 170 and gets a fresh life again, or up to 170 for the first time.
Gosh, that division is so deep, though,
yeah,
too, man.
But like
so
155,
tough.
imagine him trying to reclimb to this point again. Like it would be a tough thing to do.
All right, Oscar, I'm gonna ask you the same question. All right, can you make picks in the lightweight division? I mean, this is one that's meaningful to your boss. But
doesn't matter. Connor beat them both already.
Well, I will say this. It is funny. You know, we put together this little video piece. Abby Subban, our London-based videographer, he did the edit on it. But I just did a little like voiceover for it. And I kind of, as I was writing the script, I appreciate it. So I was writing the script of these two guys, like how it came. man, you do realize how big of a role Conor McGregor plays in this fight. I mean, both these guys lost key bouts to Conor McGregor at key moments in their career, and it kind of forced a change and pass. Of course, Conor went to absolute superstardom, and now they're fighting for a title that only exists because of a post-fight melee that Conor McGregor was involved in. So it's crazy how much Conor does play a role in this fight. But I don't know, do you have a lean from what you've seen this week? Because, dude, you said it, man. The Max Holloway that beat Brian Ortega, the Max Holloway that beat Jose Aldo, that dude, I don't know, he might beat DC like he says he go up to heavyweight and do it.
Best pound for pound in the world.
I'm telling you, but Dustin Poirier, man, the recent wins that he's had, they're incredible.
Well, yeah, so for me, whenever I think of Max Holloway, I always thought of him as a slow starter, and that was sort of his like one ching, and then he came out against Ortega and he just blew the doors off the place. So I can't help but think of this fight as Holloway doing that again. And the closer we're getting to fight night, maybe because someone looks a bit sluggish on the pads, I think actually Poirier is in this. Poirier is a dog, and you know, he can take punishment and keep going. But I think if you look at who can win in what way, if Holloway finished Poirier, knocked him out or something, I could understand that. I could see that. I don't think Holloway's ever been like hurt like that, dropped like that.
He's never been knocked down.
That's what I mean. So if Poirier knocked him out, I'd be stunned. So I think if we're looking at like who can win in what ways, I'd probably say Holloway has maybe like 10% more ways to win. So I'm going to go with Holloway.
It's great, man. I'm telling you, I love it. I actually lean toward Dustin Poirier, but again, I think some of that might be my you know, southern roots, you know, Dallas boy, Louisiana kid. But I mean, they both have ways to win. I think that's what makes this fight so fantastic.
Yeah, don't sleep on Dustin's power. Don't sleep on his wrestling. I mean, obviously it's light years ago at this point, but he submitted Max the first time around, the only one to finish it. His ground game is super underrated. You know, he's finished guys with chokes. With if
he finished it by like mounted triangle armbar again,
that would be absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, I could totally I think the wrestling is going to be a key element. We're going to see these guys stand, but at some point in this fight, Dustin is going to shoot for takedowns, and if Max shucks them off pretty easily, that's going to be a very telling thing. That's going to hurt Dustin's confidence. If he can get him down, I mean, you can make an argument in a 5-round fight, Dustin needs 3 takedowns, and he gets the win here by decision. So it's very possible that
it's kind of the way I'm leaning.
Yeah, it's very, very possible.
Holloway's got takedown defense, like
I know
he does, but not again. He's fighting Brian Ortega, not the most immaculate of wrestlers. Jose Aldo shooting for takedowns when he was hurt. So like he hasn't fought one of those true, real strong wrestlers in this run, really. So I'm compelled to see it. And Dustin Poirier, is not like a collegiate national champion or anything like that, but he's got credentials. He knows how to take dudes down.
We started this out by debating how big of a fight this is, and I think we could sit here and just keep talking for like 20, 30, 45 minutes. Not going back and forth. All right, co-main event, Kelvin Gastelum, Israel Adesanya, the interim middleweight title on the line. Of course, Kelvin Gastelum was supposed to fight for the title earlier this year. Robert Whittaker had the horrible kind of internal injuries, and he had to have surgery, and that's why he's on the shelf. They instituted this interim title. I'm interested in this one for a little bit different reason. Well, first of all, in the way that Holloway and Poirier are so have similar skill sets, and I mean, these are different guys entirely. Gastelum and Adesanya, different body types. I mean, when they stand next to each other, it is insane how much bigger Adesanya is. But the question marks around both these guys are tough, whereas the other two in the main event were saying, man, the runs they're on are incredible. The question marks around both these guys are interesting, and not because of their accomplishments. They've accomplished great things, but I look at Israel Adesanya. He has been so busy in the UFC that I almost worry if it's too busy. He's got that run that he just has not had a chance to take a mental break, to take a physical break. They just keep putting him in fights, and that's tricky. Meanwhile, you have Kelvin Gastelum, who I think it was on the first episode of Embedded, and he's admitted it this week. He's like, dude, when I lost that title fight and then had to jump back into a training camp, it was hard to find motivation. It was difficult, and I appreciate the honesty, and I can totally understand it, man. You built to this moment. It's taken away from you. Now you got to get back into it. So, I mean, I get where he's coming from, but just to hear it verbalized, it is a little scary to see. So, Oscar, a lot of ways to take this fight. I mean, Gastelum, the undefeated monster, or excuse me, Adesanya, the undefeated monster. Gastelum, the guy, the underachiever. I remember meeting him on The Ultimate Fighter and saying, this dude has zero chance to win this show. Like he's going to be the first guy out, and now he's fighting for a world title. He always proves people wrong. Give me an idea what you're seeing in this fight, what you learned this week, how you're looking at this one.
Well, I think the most important thing, as you said, is Kelvin Gastelum's back-to-back training camps. While Israel's been incredibly active, which is great, I don't think he doesn't appear jaded yet. But even today at the media day, Kelvin was like, man, I'm still not over. Flying all the way to Australia, getting woken up and told, by the way, your boyhood dream, that's next today. So he said, and what you guys don't understand is the training camp I did for that fight for Rob Whittaker was ridiculous. He was saying it was just crazy. I like destroyed myself to get to that fight to win that, and he's like, and then I had to jump back into it. He's like, I'm tired. He's like, I need a long break after this. That to me shows something like he could be, you know, he could be a bit worn out maybe.
Yeah.
And then as a vertically challenged man myself, you look at the two height differences and you sort of think, well, I mean, the old age is a good big guy beats a good small guy. And now there's obviously MMA, there's different ways to win for Kelvin, but
Right.
I mean, when you see them next to each other, it's
shocking.
Israel's a big guy, and Kelvin's, you know, stout.
Yeah.
We say so.
But I will say, and I will say this. I mean, I think on the two things that Kelvin has, right, is you would say that his wrestling is definitely better, but I think Adesanya has shown that he's probably more capable than we think he is. You know what I mean?
His fight IQ is off the charts.
It really is. You know, and then of course Kelvin does have power. I mean, he really does, and he says he doesn't think Adesanya has power. I might warn against that a little bit. I know they look a little bit pitter patty, but they.
Well, it's accuracy power.
That's right.
It's one of those things.
What is it? Timing beats speed, precision beats something about that. Yeah, I've heard that somewhere.
It's one of those things. It's an accurate power. When he knows how to hit you in the right places.
Timing beats speed. If we're gonna say it, if we're gonna reference it.
Yeah, so it's just one of those things to me. Like he could knock anyone out if he hits him in the right spot, and he knows the right spots to hit it. But yeah, he's not going in there. He doesn't have the build of like a one-punch KO artist type of thing. But that doesn't mean he can't flatline Kelvin with one shot.
All week he even said on the embedded, this is an accumulation job. He's like, Kelvin's not going out with one shot.
Exactly.
I'm going to work that body, his soft body, I believe he said.
Yep.
It's just, unnecessary if we're talking.
Come on,
if we're being honest, Israel.
Insult a man's soft body. What is wrong with you?
But he's saying he understands it's going to be accumulation of damage, and so if he already has that mindset in, then he knows like, wow, this guy's not going out.
Yep.
He's still going to be comfortable.
It's not going to be frustrating, like where you're hitting a guy with everything, saying, why is he not backing away? I get it, man. I'm excited about this fight. It's funny, I've said it all week long, but the fight that really impressed me the most with Adesanya is not the Anderson fight. It was the Brad Tavares fight of all fights.
Yeah.
That small cage in the palms, and of course we thought Brad was going to be able to kind of make it early. And I'm not saying that Brad Tavares and Kelvin Gastelum are the same fighter, but
I thought he had a good shot.
Some of those techniques would be what I would expect him to use. And I thought Adesanya showed not only that he's like, he's kind of capable of dealing with this. Like, no, he dealt with everything unquestionably. So I didn't see your staff pick for this one. Which way are you leaning?
I went Adesanya. Gastelum is very good, but I think there's holes to be poked in his resume. I mean, you could argue he should have lost the Jacare fight. His big middleweight wins are against a Michael Bisping, who was taking a fight on incredibly short notice, a Tim Kennedy, who was kind of 1 foot on the way out, Vitor Belfort, result which was ultimately overturned, but still we saw what he did, and we kind of know Vitor was on the tail end. So, yeah, it makes you kind of wonder. He hasn't been fighting guys that are young, in their prime, on the rise. He's been fighting guys that are late in their career, looking to accomplish something big kind of down the final stretch and make that last moment of glory happen in their career. He hasn't had a young opponent like Izzy, who's got a ton of momentum, a ton of hype, a skill set we still don't know too much about. So it's going to be, the questions are mostly around Izzy because we've seen less of him, but I think there's a lot around Kelvin too.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, Joshua Skipper chimed in on the chat and said, hey, can we talk about the height difference between Izzy? He's looking way down on Kelvin. How does this affect the fight? Definitely no question about it. And Erik Renee was like, how do you see Kelvin doing against Israel's reach? This is the rest against a wrestler. I feel like Israel hasn't fought a legit wrestler yet. So let's hear your pick. And what do you mean? I just mentioned the Tavares fight. Do you believe that was a legit enough wrestling test? Does Kelvin present more? Which way are you leaning in this fight?
Kelvin presents more, I think, and that's no disrespect to Tavares. I think Kelvin is a very, very good fighter. I think Kelvin's problem is almost the same as we had in the Ultimate Fight. He's still underrated. He's still maybe underappreciated. And the question from the viewer there, the reach is going to be interesting because I actually spoke to Kelvin earlier and I said, this fight's a fight about distance. Right. Whoever controls the distance wins this fight, right? And it's actually up to Kelvin to affect that because they're going to start from far away. That's all right for Israel. Kelvin has to close that distance, and Kelvin knows, and this is where the wrestling comes in. Does he use the wrestling to get in? Does he try and dip and duck and dive and dodge to get in there? I do believe that actually Kelvin's wrestling is good, but I think Israel will handle the wrestling, and I think actually Israel will win this, and then we're looking at Bobby Knuckles.
Israel and Robert Whittaker, if they can do it in the Australia-New Zealand region, I mean, that could be a stadium show. Now, the tough part for the UFC going to that part of the world is, they usually lose some pay-per-view revenue. They lose some media attention because they have to travel so far. Obviously, it's expensive to stage shows in there as well, but I think that'll be a huge show. Listen, I went with Israel Adesanya as well. I do feel bad because, like I said, from the time I met Kelvin Gastelum, I've obviously been underrating him. I thought he was going to be the first guy out on The Ultimate Fighter. And I have enjoyed watching his career and continually seeing him prove people wrong. But I do believe Adesanya is the real deal, man. I don't think he's just hype. I do think he wins the fight here. He's already kind of poking jabs at Robert Whittaker, you know, and saying, hey, listen, that guy doesn't defend. He doesn't stay busy enough, you know.
Which I take a little umbrage with. I mean, I think Robert Whittaker would be fighting 5 times a year if he just fought the 5 guys that Izzy fought.
Right.
Let's have Izzy fight Yoel Romero in 2 5-round fights back to back.
Dude,
see how active he is.
You go 10 rounds with Yoel Romero, you don't get to receive trash talk to you anymore. You get to just brush everything off and say, hey, check the record, bud. Check the record, bud.
See that guy's name on there twice?
It's cool to say. It's, you know, it's a good way to build up the fight. It's a good way to put Rob down and bring yourself up. Like, I get what he's doing there, but you know, you take a closer look. Like, is anyone here seriously questioning Robert Whittaker's legitimacy as the champion or what his road here and everything? Like, you just can't. And it's unfortunate what's happened to him. He's had a terrible line of luck over the past couple of years, but we see this stuff happen. Look what happened to Max Holloway in 2018. He had 3 canceled fights, and everyone was saying this guy should be stripped. He's a pullout merchant, to use another Conor McGregor term there.
I don't remember that one.
You know, all this stuff criticizing him. He comes back, has 1 sensational performance against Brian Ortega. Here we are, no one's even talking about that stuff.
Absolutely not. A couple more comments, by the way. Fiasco Jones chiming in. Always appreciated from Fiasco Jones. Gastelum has old man strength, even though he's not that old. He does have that old man strength. And then Chuck Thompson says, what's your number 3? This is a good question. What's your number 3 fight on the card in terms of importance and prospects for the future? Because let's look at the main card first, I guess, is probably where we would pick the next biggest fight. Erik Anders versus Khalil Roundtree. You know, both guys have had some issues, but both guys have kind of reinvented. Erik Anders at Factory X. Khalil Roundtree went out to Thailand, where he had an amazing fight camp and kind of a spiritual journey as well. Dwight Grant, the newcomer to the UFC, a great fight last time out. Alan Jobin, he's recovering after 14 months away. You know, he had surgeries, but he's a veteran there. Nikita Krylov didn't have the best return to the UFC, but certainly he's a guy that I think a lot of us were hype on. Vince St. Preux, a guy that's been around for a long time, and he says, listen, I want to get back to that title shot. That's where I want to be. So out of those main card fights, let's start with you, Mike. Anything that stands out to you as, of those 3, the one you're most anticipating?
I'm interested in Krylov versus OSP. I mean, it's the most relevant fight. Light heavyweight is shallow, but like, these guys are both ranked in that division. It's like, in terms of rankings, it's a meaningful fight. I always find rematches compelling. Obviously, Nikita got caught in the famous Owen St. Preux choke the first time around, so I'm sure he wants to right that wrong. But yeah, like, Nikita Krylov, I will never miss one of his fights. He has got, I think, had 31 pro fights. He has never been to a decision in his entire career. So, like, you know, when this guy fights, it's going to be action. So, looking forward to that one. And OSP, you know, he's had some ups, some downs, but when he goes in there and he's on, he's a great light heavyweight. And if he wants to make that last run, I think he's getting up there in age a little bit too. So, if he needs to make another run, like he says, it probably needs to start right now.
Oscar, how about you?
For me, it's Alan Jobin. You know, I think in this game that we always sort of gravitate towards the characters, and you know, he's not exactly outspoken or anything like that, but he's a bit of a character.
You gravitate towards his look.
Well, he's a very handsome young man.
He's a handsome man. Let's just be honest. Let's call it like it is.
How could you not? But I'm interested to see him because, you know, he's had some good performances in there, solid performances, and I'm interested to see what he can do. Long stretch, let's get some consistency out of him, and let's see, like, what's his ceiling, you know?
Yeah, it's funny because we didn't talk about this at all, but honestly, the one that I'm most looking forward to out of those is Anders versus Roundtree. You know, I like Erik Anders. I like, you know, the fact that he can compete in 2 divisions. Of course, you know, the former football player. I'm glad that that's not the story anymore. Like, we're finally past that.
Did you know him and OSP both played football?
I had no idea. I'm so glad we're finally past that. But seeing him go to Factory X, I mean, Mark Montoya out there, what Factory X is doing, I mean, definitely one of the top camps, probably one of the more underrated academies at this point. You know, it's not the super camps of the Jackson Wink, the ATT, but they're doing phenomenal stuff, and Mark Montoya is a phenomenal coach. Meanwhile, Khalil Roundtree, I think part of it too is he's a Vegas guy, you know, where I live. I actually saw him come up in his amateur career through the Tough Enough ranks, and then, you know, I've always been a big fan of his. He's just a good dude, and then to talk to him this week and see where he's at in his headspace, I mean, after going to Thailand and basically having, you know, what he considered like a spiritual rediscovery and happiness in the sport. So I'm most excited about that one. So I think there's really good storylines in there without the maybe necessarily the star power. The great thing is, though, because we all agree that the main and co-main are sick, is that those 3 first main card fights could all end in very violent fashion. Like, all 3 of them could be highlight reel endings.
Yeah, seems to be a theme with cards that Max Holloway headlines. They're just kind of built this way. The past 2 Toronto shows, the Detroit show that had Gaethje and Alvarez and Overeem and Ngannou, like they seem to put him on these cards that are kind of like a more for the hardcore fans. It seems like a lot of knockouts. I think I saw something the UFC put out today. Like I think it's, I don't know if it was all the fighters on the main card or all the fighters on the card in general, but they have like 134 finishes together or something like that. Like, so something ridiculous like that. So like they're clearly trying to kind of promote that way, that, you know, tune in if you want to see some violent outcomes. And I think, as you just said, the potential for all these fights on there have, you know, we could have a card that ends in 5 knockouts here.
Yeah,
not to jinx it, knock on wood.
I agree. And I guess I'm sure if you're watching an event preview, you're a hardcore, and at this point you realize you got to get that pay-per-view on ESPN Plus now. That's the only place to buy the pay-per-view, so make sure you line up for that. Prelims real quick. Let's talk about the ESPN prelims. Matt Frevola versus Jalen Turner. Alexander Pantoja versus Wilson Hayes. A flyweight fight. What are we doing flyweight fights for? Max Griffin versus Alim Amadiev. Boston Salmon versus Khalil Taha. Look, some storylines here that I'm really looking forward to. Boston Salmon finally making his UFC debut after so long on the shelf. You know, he had to have knee surgery, and he's fighting Khalil Taha, so I'm anxious to see. A lot of people in the Vegas area especially really high on Boston Salmon. Max Griffin versus Salim. Salim is one of these Russian newcomers, and it's so funny. I had heard great things about him. By the way, Ali Abdelaziz, he's a dominant MMA client. Ali has been telling everybody that this is the guy to pay attention to. This is our next new star. And so I just asked Max Griffin earlier this week what he knew about him, wondering if he had any idea who the guy was. He's like, yeah, I hate him. Like, he's a jerk. Like, I sparred him, and he tried to go too hard on me, and he's a bully in the gym. So, I mean, he has like a personal feeling here. I thought I was just going to be like, oh, I don't know, I'm just fighting some unknown Russian guy, whatever, we'll do it. He's like, oh, no, I hate him, and I want to teach him a lesson. So that was great. The flyweights, I mean, these are 2 ranked flyweights. It means something. Guess we still don't know what the future of the flyweight division is, although it seems like it's heading out the door, but at least, you know, they're still having some fights with these guys. Frevola, he's a guy that had a lot of steam behind him. Jalen Turner, 6'3" at lightweight. I mean, some interesting storylines there. So give me an idea, you know, if there's one fight on there, one person on there that stands out most. We'll start with you, Oscar.
I like Jalen Turner, man. It's a little bit weird.
Yeah.
Weird people. He loves spiders, loves tarantulas.
He has many at home.
I mean, I just think, as far as a viewer, like, his size for that weight just means it's like, well, what can this guy achieve? You know? So I'm always curious to see how he does. You know, he's an up-and-comer. His skills have still got to be developed.
Only 23.
But just
crazy.
Just the size of that weight is not normal, and therefore I want to see sort of like, what can he do with it?
Yeah, he's always unique. No matter who he's fighting, he's always going to be. Joshua Skipper actually weighed in there and said, what about Jalen Turner? Debut didn't work out, but his last fight sure did. I think there's a lot of potential there. I like the kid's attitude. I like the kid's confidence. What about you? Out of those ESPN prelims, Mike, anything you're most looking forward to?
It's got to be that Max Griffin fight, just because, you know, he is pretty entertaining. I thought he got robbed against Thiago Alves last time in Brazil. He's trying to rebound from that one, and yeah, he just made me in that one interview, that one maybe 90-second segment of your sit down with him on Wednesday, I believe it was. He got me super stoked for this fight. And I mean, you know, guys like Salim, you know, you mentioned Ali kind of hyped him up. The last time I've heard Ali beat the drum so hard of a guy like this was Zabit. So that kind of says something. You know, say what you will about Ali, but I think he knows talent when he sees it, and he has, you know, a big roster of talent. And if he's hyping this guy, I think there's something to be said there. So
he actually called him. He told me, he's like, this is the next Zabit.
Yeah. So that says a lot right there. So yeah, down to watch that type of thing right there.
All right, we had a question. Anti-Panty? Wow, interesting name there. What's next? What's next for Tony Ferguson? What do you guys have you heard anything this week? I mean, listen, he says he's medically cleared. That's a good thing. Happy to hear about that. Man, you can't make light of what he's going through. You got to take it serious. I mean, dealing with some issues for sure, and happy to see that he's getting healthy, because, dude, you can't be a fan of MMA and not be a fan of Tony Ferguson. That dude is awesome. And you know, the fact that he has deserved this opportunity for so long. I don't know. What do you guys, have you heard anything, or what are you thinking? What are you hoping?
I haven't heard anything in particular. I mean, I know he put out that tweet. I felt kind of weird about the whole thing. Like, you know, I do my post-fight matchmaker stories and stuff, and like I put out some choices for some winners of some fights, and people are like, what about Tony Ferguson? I don't feel comfortable matchmaking for the guy right now. Like, we're just bringing him into the conversation. He's going through some serious stuff, and he says he's medically cleared. I haven't heard any actual evidence of that. We don't know what that really means. I mean, if the things that he was allegedly dealing with are what they are, you could make an argument this guy should never fight again, medical clearance or not. So I don't really know. I mean, it would be cool to see the Khabib fight, but the winner of this between Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier on Saturday should get that shot. I mean, or what are we doing with these interim titles again? Kind of have to do that. So I'd like to see him come back if he does, and he can just fight someone in the top 5, whoever's.
God, I hate for him to come back and not get a title shot.
It sucks, but you got to do it at this point. I mean, who knows? If we don't see him again towards the end of the year, it could be around a year layoff for him. So, like, I just think you need to get him in there, have him win a fight, and then if you can do the Khabib fight right there, maybe have him fight Conor if he comes back.
I think for me, it's similar to what you started off saying. If what Tony was supposedly going through a tree, I don't really feel super cool about letting a guy like that get head trauma for another couple of years.
He's taking a lot of shots.
It's going to be an unpopular opinion because everyone wants to see that Tony Ferguson Khabib fight. It's one of the most anticipated fights you can do right now. But I mean, sometimes you got to maybe just take a little bit of a step back from the sport and think, well, there are people here, there are people's lives on the line here. So I'm very happy to see that he seems to be improving, at least by his social media, he seems to be improving. That's great, but they need to be very, very careful about rushing him, making him do anything. Like, sometimes it's important to take your time.
As fight fans, we're very selfish, we want to see these guys compete, but like sometimes, if it's the end for Tony, then it's the end.
Nobody
like,
can't force the man to fight.
Mike, sometimes it's just bleed, sometimes it's stop the bleeding.
Exactly. Don't bleed at all.
Should say, by the way, on the early prelims, I think the class fight that really stands out to me is Curtis Milner versus Bilal Muhammad. Man, that is going to be a very fun fight there. So again, I do think this card top to bottom is going to be very, very entertaining, even if it's lacking some of the star power. It may not feel like a Conor McGregor event, a John Jones event, a big Vegas event, but I do think it's going to be very entertaining. We'll take one more question here because it is a good question from Chuck Thompson. After this, because we've got this 155 fight, I guess it kind of depends too on what the result of it is, but should we see some clarity at 145 after this weekend? I mean, you've got Edgar, Ortega, Zabit, all there. I mean, if Max wins, I don't think he's going back down to defend that 145 belt right away, and if he loses, maybe he's more compelled, but then is there a clear number 1 contender? They need to have a number 1 contender fight. So one way or another, do we get more clarity at 145? Because I'm not sure we do.
I don't think immediately. Like, I don't think Saturday night at the press conference, Dana's going to come and be like, Max Holloway is the champion if he wins. He's vacating the 145 title. We're doing Frankie Edgar versus Moicano for the vacant belt or something like that. Maybe he does, but I just don't see that as likely. I think they'll probably wait a bit, see exactly when Khabib is coming back at 155. I mean, it sounds like they're trying to do an Abu Dhabi show in September. Max Holloway told me today he is all for that. So, but he said if after this they send me a contract to defend my 145 title, I will sign that and I'll be right back down there. So he's open to whatever. So I think it's going to be in the UFC's hands what they want to do, but it is a tough position because I don't think there's no one to me at 145 that jumps out as like a really sellable fight. Like Frankie Edgar versus Moicano is a lot of fun, or Ortega rematch or something like that, but it just that's not something that I'm not racing to slam my money down for.
I mean, if Max loses, obviously he's got to go back down, and I guess you just pick one of those guys because you could really, other than Ortega, because we just saw it. There's a couple options there.
The Edgar fight.
The Edgar fight's probably it. But oh man, you know how many people are getting pissed off if Frank Edgar gets another title shot? There's so many people that are going to be mad. But if he wins, there's no way he goes back down to 145 right away. I mean, right? The big money fight now is go fight Khabib.
I mean, listen, look, clarity is overrated now. I mean, heavyweight, DC Lesnar, 205's clear, 185 interim belt, 170 clear, 155 interim title, 145 we don't know, 135 their champion's just gone, 125 we don't know if it's the division. Clarity is overrated in this game these days.
Boy, that just made me sad.
I know, I'm sorry about that. Just thinking of that, wow, that's depressing. But I think if Holloway loses, actually, do you know what? I don't even think if he loses. I think it's so hard to go up and then think, okay, cool, I'll go back to that excruciating lifestyle change and go back down to a division that essentially I've basically beaten everyone out anyway. I think Max is a company guy. I think if you put a name in front of him, he will fight them. But I think on the UFC's point, it's almost like, why make him go back down? Max is such a big name, such an exciting fighter. There are so many fights at 155 we all want to see. It's like, sure, he could go down and wait for Volkanovski or Ortega or Edgar to get another title shot. We could wait for that, but why bother? I think he should stay at 155 regardless what happens.
I tell you what, I know you can't comment on this, but I would be way more interested in seeing Max and Conor rematch than I would see Conor and Khabib. So, just something. Just throwing it out.
But I really love that Max versus Khabib fight. I mean, we were supposed to get it in Brooklyn. Obviously, it's ridiculous that Max Holloway took that fight on about less than a week's notice. Obviously, he couldn't make the weight or was not cleared to keep cutting. But yeah, that's a fight that already has a storyline. We already have the stare down photos from some stuff like on the site. You know, there's some momentum there, and I think Khabib is interested in that fight. Max is just all about, he's made it very clear this week of his goals. He wants to be #1 pound for pound in the entire sport, and he's willing to fight anyone it takes to get there. And Khabib, a guy who's lost 1 round in his entire MMA career, that 3rd round to Conor McGregor. That's a fight that makes a lot of sense. You know, you have a guy who's 11-0 in the UFC versus a guy who'd be on a 14-fight winning streak. Like, there's just so many compelling aspects to that, and doing it in Abu Dhabi would be extremely fascinating.
I don't know if you know this, but Abu Dhabi is actually the 11th island. I don't know if you're aware of that. Not a lot of people don't know, but Hawaii is big in Abu Dhabi, so it would really be marketable there. All right, listen, we're gonna wrap it up. This is fun, man. Maybe we'll have to do this again. It's not something we've done in the past. Thank you to the UFC for scheduling a morning media day so we could wrap this up. So if they do that again, maybe we'll do this in the future. For everybody that tuned in, we appreciate it. Enjoy UFC